time has arisen for the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee meeting for February 26th. Dawn, would you call the roll, please, so that we know that we have a quorum?
Mr. Flacco.
Present.
Mr. Stamnis.
Here.
Ms. Derrick.
Here.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Borboom.
Here.
Ms. White. Mr. Gust.
Here.
Mr. Brightling.
Here.
Ms. Maggio. Ms. Turnberg. And Mr. Zimmerman.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Is there a quorum present?
Yes, a quorum is present.
Thank you. The first item of business would be to approve the minutes from the November 13, 2024 meeting. This is a voice vote. We would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as printed and published.
Flacco, so moves.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I would appreciate it for Dawn's sake if whoever makes or seconds the motion, that they identify themselves so that she can accurately reflect that in the minutes.
Matt seconds.
Are there any other questions or concerns or comments concerning the motion that you've heard? If not, all in those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. The chair will rule the motion carried. The second item of business is the order of the agenda, and that too is a voice vote. The chair would entertain a motion to approve that order of agenda.
Jake Gus makes that motion.
Is there a second?
Derrick will second.
Are there any other questions or discussion concerning this motion? If not, all of those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The chair will rule the motion is carried. The next three items will be introduced by our attorney, Mr. Shockley. The first of these is item number 4, election of the chair for the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee. John, are you prepared to discuss this with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Acting Chair, we'll just need this is a housekeeping item pursuant to the Joint Powers Agreement. The Land Management Committee needs to elect a chair and a vice chair. And so the recommended process is for one of the board members to make a nomination, a second, and then assuming there's only one nomination, then you would vote on it.
Is there a nomination of those in attendance for the chair position for the coming calendar year?
I'd move that Commissioner Breitling be nominated as the chair.
Is there a second?
Zimmerman seconds.
Are there any other nominations? This requires a roll call vote. Hearing no other nominations, Dawn, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Flacco.
Aye.
Mr. Stamnis.
Yes.
Ms. Derrick. Mr. Borboom.
Yes.
Mr. Gust.
Yeah.
Mr. Brightling. And Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
And that is everyone.
My understanding and correction of the tally is that the motion did carry. The next item of business is the election of a vice chair for the upcoming calendar year. Are there any nominations from the floor for that position?
I'd make the nomination that Commissioner Campbell be nominated for the vice chair.
Is there a second to that motion?
Flacco seconds.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, Dawn, would you call the roll as to this nominee?
Mr. Flacco,
Aye.
Mr. Stamnis,
Yes.
Ms. Derrick,
Yes.
Mr. Borboom,
Yes.
Mr. Gust,
yes,
Mr. Breitling,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
That is everyone.
The chair will rule the motion is carried. The next item of business is our three items, all requiring a roll call vote. We're going to ask Mr. Dodds from AE2S to discuss those with us. The first item is the sale of excess land, item number 6. Eric?
Yes, thank you. Here, I thought I was going to have the hard part of the meeting, but that was pretty intense. So, anyway, in front of you today, as Commissioner Breitling noted, there are 3 excess land recommendation items. The first one is for OIN 839. This was in your packet. OIN 839 is a piece of land, a former rural residential parcel in the upstream mitigation area. This parcel was actually declared as excess about a year ago, and since that time, we've been working through the policy and process where we first ask the member entities, then we ask the former landowner if they're interested, then we ask the adjacent landowners if they're interested. None of those parties were interested. This has then been for sale via the public sale portion of the policy. We didn't initially have any interested parties, but recently there was an interested party that came forward proposing the purchase price of $7,000. The original excess land recommendation was for $10,500, and so the proposed offer is slightly less than that. The land's staff are recommending approval of this sale price, and we wanted to bring that forward to the committee for consideration.
Are there any questions of Mr. Dodds, of those members of the committee? Hearing none being asked, I would ask for a motion to approve this recommended sale.
Stamps make that motion.
Is there a second?
Flacco seconds.
Are there any discussion or questions relevant to this motion? Hearing none, Dawn, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Flacco,
Yes.
Mr. Stamnis,
Yes.
Ms. Derrick,
Yes.
Mr. Borboom,
Yes.
Mr. Gust,
yes,
Mr. Breitling,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
That is everyone.
According to my calculations, the majority carries. The next item of business is number 7 on the agenda, and I'd ask for an explanation of this item from Mr. Dodds as well.
Yes, Commissioner Breitling, board members, committee members, excuse me. This item is an excess land recommendation for OIN 1080Y. Similarly, this was a parcel of land that was declared as excess back in October of 2024, and we have been working through the process of reaching the former landowner asking for interest in this. Recently, in doing some review of our records of the available excess lands, it was identified that we had inadvertently double counted the temporary construction acres that are on this parcel. The parcel actually contains 4.917 acres, and previously it was inadvertently calculated at 7.877 acres. Getting the corrected acres right using the same recommended sale price of $6,700 per acre, the recommended sale price should be $33,000 rather than $53,000. And so because of that correction, we wanted to bring this forward for the committee's consideration in hopes that obviously you would approve this again, and hopefully the former owner or perhaps the adjacent owners would be interested in purchasing this parcel. This is a small sliver of land adjacent to the southern embankment. This piece is encumbered by a flowage easement, so it's on the wet side of the embankment. I'd stand for any questions.
Are there any questions?
Flacco moves to approve the recommendation.
Is there a second?
Borboom will second.
Is there any further discussion or questions concerning this motion? Hearing none, this also calls for a roll call vote. Dawn, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Flacco?
Aye.
Mr. Stamnis?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
Mr. Borboom?
Yes.
Mr. Gust?
Yes.
Mr. Breitling?
Yes.
And Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you. The chair will rule the motion is carried. The third item is number
8.
eight on your agenda. And I'd ask for Mr. Dodds to review and explain this item as well.
Yeah, in your packet, there's quite a bit of material related to this agenda item. This is 3 separate parcels of the former rail corridor in Horace. This portion of the rail corridor is starting in downtown Horace and extends a little bit south. This portion of the corridor includes a stretch that's about 200 feet wide, and then it goes down to about 100 feet wide further south. The discussions we've had in this parcel in the past, if you recall, back in November, this committee had some discussions about this portion of the rail corridor. At the time, the city of Horace had reached out and identified that they were interested in installing a sanitary sewer line. The committee at that point encouraged us to talk with several of the adjacent landowners and identify if they were still interested in buying this corridor with that sewer line on it. We gathered some feedback from some adjacent landowners. Some of them expressed interest in purchasing the corridor. Some of them indicated that with the utility easement, they would not be interested in purchasing the land if it was encumbered by a utility easement. Maybe to back up a little bit further, this rail corridor was purchased by the project several years ago. The railroad has a statutory process that they need to follow to dispose of railroad land that gets abandoned. The railroad has completed that process, and since our agreement with the railroad required that the project purchase anything that was left over. So now we have purchased what you see on the screen here in the green shaded areas, and there's been some other portions of the rail corridor that have been disposed of. There are 3 other pieces of the rail corridor that are further south and west that this committee and the boards have declared as excess land, and we are working through the process of platting these pieces and selling these pieces back to the adjacent landowners. That process has been going on for months, and it's been a pretty significant effort. The piece in question for today includes OIN 7234A, B, C, and D. Piece A is where the elevator sits in Horace. B, C, and D are just south of there. What you see on the screen and in the memo is some excerpts from the excess land policy, where we first have a preference to the member entities. None of the member entities of the authority expressed interest. The prior landowner, the railroad, has waived that right. They do not want to buy it back. The policy currently states that the adjacent landowners would then have the next right, and then there's a public sale. There are also provisions of the policy that encourage the diversion authority to consider what's in the best interest of the authority and to consider public use of these lands. Scrolling down, you can see this is parcel B. The different colors indicate the values of those different parcels or different parts of that parcel. And then this is the map showing C and D. Some information in here about, again, the policy encourages the consideration of public use. Because of the various interests in this corridor, the city of Horace has opined or indicated that they do have an interest in this parcel. We had some interest from some adjacent landowners. And so because of those sort of competing interests, the city of Horace was holding a meeting and they were asking what their opportunities might be. We explained to the city of Horace that we had some mixed feedback from landowners. We have a policy that typically requires going to the adjacent landowners. The policy does also have a variance process. And so the city of Horace reviewed, they met, and they submitted a proposal to the authority, which is what's being considered today. City of Horace asked that they have the right to purchase this corridor, and that would require a variance of the policy. The policy, as I've stated before, was developed several years ago and largely based on thinking our excess lands were going to be farmland. Knowing that there was going to be some odds and ends like this rail corridor, we made sure that the policy did include a variance provision. Selling farmland, I believe, if I'm paraphrasing those that developed the policy and the committee that worked on that, really wanted to make sure that farmland was going to remain as farmland and the adjacent producers had the opportunity to continue farming that land. And so that was kind of the stepwise flow as you work through the policy. Here for the railroad, it's obviously a different piece of land. Again, unique parcels, and so that was one of the reasons why there was a variance provision in the policy. So what's in front of the committee is a recommendation to move forward with declaring this corridor as excess land and approving a variance so that we can move forward with selling the land to the city of Horace. In doing so, we would also be recommending that the city of Horace take on the responsibility for all of the legal work, survey work, platting work necessary to sell or necessary for this sale. As I mentioned before, we are working through some of those processes for other pieces of the rail corridor, and it's a pretty substantial effort. We also are very concerned, as you see on the map here, there's roughly 30 adjacent landowners. And we really don't want to be left in a situation where one of these or two of these landowners decides not to buy their fair share and be left with kind of a patchwork of ownership, being difficult for maintenance and access issues. And so our recommendation from a staff level is to move forward with selling this in kind of one chunk. The city of Horace has offered to buy that. And that would require a variance to the policy. So quite a bit more detail in the packet here. Happy to go into more discussion on that if you'd like. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Dodds after his explanation of this item?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jake Gust.
Please.
Yep. So I got an extensive email from the landowner that's interested in purchasing one of those parcels, and he's really accusing us of not following our policy. And I really think that we should have a meeting with the city of Horace and this property owner to try to resolve this so that the joint board does not end up being criticized for abandoning the policy that's been set up. And so it would be my recommendation that we would table this and try to resolve this thing so that we don't end up with some unhappy people and perhaps a court case. And it's my feeling that the joint board may not approve this tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Gust. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion that anyone wishes to make? I assume that, Mr. Gust, that you have that's a motion on your part?
Yes, I'd be happy to make that a motion.
Is there a second to Mr. Gust's motion? Hearing none, the chair will rule that that motion has died or failed for a lack of a second. Is there any other questions or discussion that should take place at this time?
So I think I'm newer to the board or the commission or the committee, I guess. And so I think some of the questions I'd have is, I mean, I completely understand it's going to be an all or nothing if we can't come to an agreement with all of the neighbors so that we can exercise selling all the land. It's really kind of an all or nothing discussion. And so how much time do you give to get to that all or nothing? Or do you do a variance from the policy and do a one sale? I think that's one of the things I've been thinking about is how long do you wait to try and figure out if all of them are going to come on? Because you don't want a parcel in the middle of that no one can get to either. And so is there a timeline of if we can't get to it by this timeline, then we do look at a one sale or when have we exhausted everything that we would look at a variance?
I would ask the staff to respond to that question.
Yeah, maybe just a few thoughts on that. So, right now we have an obligation to maintain this, and that's costing some money, of course, with mowing and maintenance and access issues. I think there's probably quite a bit that could be said about the maintenance aspects down here. I'm not super familiar with the details of that myself, but I know the DA staff and contractors are working on that, and there's issues of encroachment and issues of trespassing and other matters. And so I think from a staff standpoint, disposing of this as soon as possible is probably in the best interest of the authority. In terms of, being left with the patchwork, I think we are really concerned about that as well. You can imagine having, one or two pieces left in the middle and getting access in there for maintaining it and being a good landowner is a complicated factor. Timing wise, we have contacted a handful of these landowners. I'll say maybe half, maybe not quite half of them, because we had their contact information and that sort of thing. So if the desire was to not move forward with a variance, I think we would probably be working hard to try to reach out to as many of these landowners as we could and try to get maybe some sort of uniform proposal from the neighborhood. We might end up, breaking this whole stretch into 3 different pieces and having to sell it as, 3 different chunks perhaps. There are some rights of ways you can see kind of in a darker blue color on the map here. So I think there are a few paths forward. Again, I think there is some cost and expense to delay, and there's certainly some cost and expense if we have to go down the route of platting and splitting it up as conceptualized on the map here. So.
Mr. Flacco.
Mr. Chairman and members, I would be more inclined, we're a little bit chicken or the egg here and from my perspective, because I haven't been involved in this. Had there been a time certain involved in the motion, I would be much more amicable to that. But to lay it on the table as the motion was, it's indefinite. But if it would be, different if it was laid on the table until, pick a week prior to our next meeting, that date, have a chance to resolve or, lay it on the table until our next meeting to give some space to let people weigh in, whether it's Horace or the many landowners along there. But I don't know when our next meeting is, so that's where the chicken or the egg comes a little bit for me.
Would be a month from now, roughly, our next meeting. Normally, they're monthly.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on that. This committee used to meet monthly very regularly. I think over the last year or 18 months, it's probably met as needed, maybe once a quarter generally. Your call on how frequently you want to meet. The other thing I would just mention is there is a representative from the proposer here in the crowd. If you are interested in hearing from the city of Horace, I think they're able to comment.
They're here.
Chairman, could I ask a question of Mr. Dodds? So you said there's approximately 30 homes or 30 different properties out here? And
Yep.
historically, the Diversion Authority has been the one to create those legal descriptions on all those?
On the other, on the three other sections of rail corridor that are further south than this, those sales are moving forward to the adjacent landowners. And we've been in the process of working on the purchase agreements, the plating, the surveys. The plat is currently with the city of Horace, waiting for their approval. And I guess at this point, we've seen verbal intention from landowners that they will buy their portion, but there's been some turnover of some of those lands throughout the 6-month process that it takes to get all the plats prepared and things. And so we are a little bit concerned that perhaps somebody backs out at the 11th hour. And so because of that experience on that process, I think we're, I guess frankly, hoping to avoid that process again if we can. But if that's the direction, we'll certainly go that way.
And just approximately for these 30 parcels, what would the cost be to create all those documents? Compare against what the potential land sale proceeds may be.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess probably rough number, $50,000 worth of effort, staff time, consultant time, legal time.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Flacco, would you?
I'll
wanna make
run you a
that?
motion here. And I would move that we lay issue number 8 on the table until a meeting in March. That way, whatever we schedule that meeting, I mean, I don't want to say the second half of March because that's pretty sloppy motion. But that gives a month to try to pop some things loose. And if nothing can be done, then, I feel a little better that we've done some due diligence with it. And this is my first meeting, and we haven't had meetings, in December or January. So this is, we don't have them every month necessarily, but that's kind of my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Jake would second that.
Are there any other questions or discussion concerning the motion that's presently before us? Hearing none, this would require a roll call. Dawn, can you take care of that for us?
Mr. Flacco,
Aye.
Stamnis,
Yes.
Ms. Derrick,
Yes.
Mr. Borboom,
Yes.
Mr. Gust,
Yes.
Mr. Breitling,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
That is everyone.
One thing that I should have mentioned to start with, on all of these items, what we're really doing is recommending to the Diversion Authority that they take this action. We're not making that final decision at this time. Even if we had approved all 3 of these, it would simply be in the way of a recommendation to the full board of the Diversion Authority to approve these. I think it's important that we all understand that. Are there any other questions or comments that wish to be made at this time? Is there any other business that needs to come before this board, this committee at this time? We need to determine the next meeting, particularly in light of the motion that we just passed. What would a month from today be?
Sorry to interject, but typically this committee would meet the Wednesday prior to the board meeting, which would be Wednesday, March 26th at 3 PM is the normal time.
Does that meet with the committee's approval? Hearing no objection to that, the chair will rule that our next meeting,
Mr. Chairman, this is Jake again. I believe the joint board has moved their meeting at the end of March from Thursday to Wednesday. So that board would be meeting before the plan management meeting.
does that cause a conflict?
Well, he won't be able to approve it that week. We'll probably have to wait 2-3 weeks for the joint board to make a recommendation.
Perhaps Tuesday at 4 o'clock, or we can work off channel.
What day?
March 25th is the Tuesday.
Is that acceptable? March 25, a Tuesday at 3 o'clock?
My question would be, is there any issue if we act on it on the Wednesday and the joint board doesn't take it up for 2 weeks? Does that cause some sort of conflict?
I think that's probably fine.
Not to me, it doesn't, but it may to others. I don't want to speak for everyone.
Jake has no problem with that.
With the 22nd, Tuesday?
Either Tuesday or waiting 2 weeks for the joint board to meet. I just let you know that so that you know that the joint board won't be able to consider it that week.
Thank you. The chair will rule that the motion, that the next meeting will be on the 26th at 2 o'clock? 3 o'clock? Does that meet with, or any strenuous objections? Hearing none, the chair will rule that that would be the schedule for us. There is no other business, so the chair will now rule that this meeting is adjourned.